The late afternoon sun bled through the blinds of Dawson's Grill, a quiet roadside steakhouse on the outskirts of Pine Hill, Georgia. Dust floated in the golden beams of light. The place smelled of charred meat, black coffee, and something faintly metallic. The kind of scent that clung to old buildings and older secrets. At one of the corner booths sat Isaiah Cole, a man who moved like he had lived 3 lives and carried all 3 on his back. His broad shoulders were squared even in rest, his knuckles scarred, his posture straight. A silver chain hung from his neck, hidden partly by the collar of a faded denim shirt. On that chain was a dog tag. Dull, worn, and older than most of the people around him, Isaiah was a veteran. Not the kind who talked about it. The kind who saw too much, came home, and learned silence was safer than memory. He'd been driving for 2 days, from Montgomery to Pine Hill, following a letter that arrived 3 weeks ago from a lawyer he'd never met. Something about land that once belonged to his late father, sold without consent. Isaiah didn't know what he'd find here, but he'd promised his mother before she passed. "You find what's ours, son. Don't let them bury us twice." He had spent the morning in the county records office, arguing with a clerk who refused to make eye contact. "We don't have those files anymore," the man kept saying. "Must have been lost when we moved the archives." Lost. Isaiah knew that word too well. So now he sat at Dawson's, staring at the laminated menu. His mind miles away, until he heard her voice. "Afternoon, sir. You ready to order?" Isaiah looked up. The waitress was young, early 20s maybe, with chestnut hair tied in a neat ponytail and a name tag that read Claire. Her voice was kind, but her eyes held something else. Hesitation, worry, maybe even fear. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "I'll take the ribeye. Medium rare." "Mashed potatoes." "And coffee, black." She nodded, scribbling quickly, but her hand trembled. "Just slightly." "Coming right up." He noticed the glance she gave him as she turned away. Not the kind that judged, but the kind that knew something. The grill sizzled. Old men in work boots talked about local elections at the counter. A sheriff's deputy leaned back in his chair near the door, his belt gleaming, one hand resting too comfortably on his holster. When Claire brought Isaiah's coffee, she hesitated again. "You're not from around here, are you?" "No, ma'am." He stirred the black coffee, his reflection rippling in it. "Just passing through," she bit her lip. "Be careful who you talk to." Isaiah looked up slowly. "Excuse me?" Before she could answer, the deputy called out, "Hey, Claire, you telling secrets over there?" His tone was playful on the surface, but something in his grin made Isaiah's stomach tighten. She smiled weakly. "Just taking his order, Tom." Isaiah said nothing. But when the deputy turned back to his drink, Claire leaned in close, pretending to straighten the napkin by his plate. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They know who you are, Mr. Cole." He froze. The spoon in his hand clattered softly against the cup. "How do you know my name?" She slipped a folded napkin under his hand, pressed her finger against it for a half-second, as if pleading for him not to react, and hurried away. Isaiah unfolded it slowly beneath the table. Inside, scrawled in hurried ink, "Don't go back to your car. They planted something." For a moment, the sounds around him faded. The chatter, the clink of cutlery, even the country song playing from the jukebox. It was as if the world held its breath. Isaiah's pulse quickened. He glanced through the window. His truck, a weathered Ford with veteran plates, sat in the parking lot, sunlight bouncing off its hood. Nothing seemed off. But after 2 tours overseas, he'd learned to trust instincts over appearances. He folded the napkin again, slipped it into his pocket, and looked toward the counter. Claire was gone, disappeared into the kitchen. The deputy was still watching him. Isaiah took a long breath, steady and quiet. His right hand brushed the silver dog tag at his chest, like a man touching a compass. He'd been hunted before, but this time it was on his own soil. 10 minutes later, Claire returned with his steak. Perfectly seared, glistening in butter. Her face was pale. "Everything all right?" she whispered, eyes flicking to the window. Isaiah nodded slightly. "Tell me what's going on." Her throat bobbed. You came here asking questions about land. The Dawsons sold it to a developer, but that land wasn't theirs to sell. It belonged to your father, Henry Cole. Isaiah's grip tightened around the fork. You knew my father? My mama did, she stammered. She said he helped people around here once. He stood up to Sheriff Dawson when nobody else dared. Isaiah leaned forward. And now? Her eyes shimmered with fear. Now the sheriff runs everything. The land, the records, even the bank. They don't want you to dig. That's why... She stopped, glancing toward the deputy again. That's why what? That's why they put something in your truck. Sheriff said if a stranger came asking about the Coles, they'd make sure he never left town. A chill ran through Isaiah's veins. Not fear, Clarity. The kind that soldiers felt right before a firefight. You risked your job telling me this, he said quietly. She swallowed. My conscience wouldn't let me stay quiet. Isaiah stood, left a 20 on the table, and headed toward the door. Every eye in the diner followed him. The deputy smiled like a man watching his prey walk into a trap. Outside, the sun had begun to dip, turning the asphalt gold. Isaiah stopped halfway to his truck and crouched, pretending to tie his bootlace, while his eyes scanned the undercarriage. And there it was. A small black box, magnetized to the fuel tank. Not a bomb, a tracker, possibly with an explosive failsafe. Small enough to look harmless, deadly enough to make a point. His jaw clenched. He straightened slowly, walking back toward the diner. Through the window, he met Claire's gaze. She shook her head ever so slightly. Don't come back in. Instead, Isaiah crossed the lot, stopped behind the sheriff's cruiser, and memorized the license number. He'd been quiet too long. The sun sank behind the pines, and the first evening chill set in. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A train whistle cried. And Isaiah Cole, son of Henry Cole, war veteran and ghost of justice long denied, realized Pine Hill had just made its biggest mistake. They thought they could scare him off. But Isaiah had come to reclaim more than land. He'd come to reclaim his father's name. As he walked away from the truck, a black sedan turned into the lot. Tinted windows, government plates. It stopped beside his vehicle, engine idling. Two men stepped out in suits. Isaiah froze, half hidden behind the signpost. The driver lifted a device, small, blinking red, and pressed it. A flash. A roar. Fire erupted from under the truck, a violent bloom that threw metal into the air and set the sky ablaze. People screamed from inside the diner. The waitress dropped her tray, and Isaiah Cole, standing in the orange glow of his burning truck, whispered to himself, "You just declared war." Smoke still hung thick over Dawson's grill like a ghost that refused to leave. The shattered remains of Isaiah's truck hissed and crackled, flames licking at the twisted frame. Sirens wailed in the distance, too slow to be an accident, too rehearsed to be coincidence. Isaiah stood several yards away, face half lit by the fire's glow. His reflection flickered in the inferno like a man split between past and present, soldier and son. The world around him blurred with the rush of heat and adrenaline. Someone screamed, "That man's truck just blew up!" He could feel eyes on him, judgment, suspicion, fear. The sheriff arrived seconds later, lights flashing red and blue across the gravel. Sheriff Dawson, tall, silver-haired, face carved with false authority, stepped out, hands on his belt like he owned the oxygen people breathed. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. "Mr. Cole, wasn't it? Looks like you had yourself quite the accident." Isaiah didn't blink. "You call that an accident?" Dawson's smile was small and cold. "These old trucks. Things catch fire all the time. Probably a fuel leak." Claire stood by the diner window, trembling. She wanted to speak, but Isaiah caught her eyes and gave a small shake of his head. Not yet. The deputy from earlier, Tom, was smirking beside the sheriff, chewing gum like a man enjoying a show. Isaiah's voice was calm, but his gaze could cut through concrete. "You might want to check your facts, Sheriff. I just had that truck serviced 2 days ago. No leaks." Dawson took a step closer. "You accusing my county of something, son?" "I'm accusing someone," Isaiah said. "Haven't decided who yet." The sheriff's jaw flexed. You be careful, Mr. Cole. Folks around here don't take kindly to outsiders stirring up trouble. Maybe it's best you move on before things get difficult. Isaiah met his gaze squarely. That sounds like a threat. Call it neighborly advice. A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy, electric. Then Dawson turned to his men. Get this mess cleaned up. Isaiah watched as they began clearing debris, pretending to investigate, though every movement was too deliberate, too neat. Evidence erased in plain sight. He turned and walked away, slow and steady, the reflection of the flames still burning in his dark eyes. The motel room that night. Isaiah checked into a run-down roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon and doors that barely locked. He paid cash, no ID. He sat at the small table by the window, studying the folded napkin Claire had given him earlier. Don't go back to your car. They planted something. She was right. They had meant to kill him. Isaiah leaned back in the chair, hands clasped. The years of combat had taught H. He looked at her, studying the fear in her eyes. Why are you helping me, Claire? You don't owe me anything. Her answer came quietly. Because my daddy served too, Afghanistan. Came home broken. People in this town treated him like trash when he couldn't work. He died believing he was worthless. You walked into that diner today, and for a second I saw the same look in your eyes, a man carrying too much alone. I couldn't let them do this to you too. Isaiah's expression softened. Your father would have been proud of you. She blinked away tears. Then let me prove it. I can get you inside the records office. I have keys, and my uncle cleans there after hours. If the sheriff's son changed the deeds, there'll be copies on the system. But you'll have to move fast. Isaiah nodded slowly. Tomorrow night, midnight. The next evening, Pine Hill was quiet. Too quiet. The streets glistened from a light rain, and the courthouse loomed like an old, patient beast waiting for prey. Isaiah and Claire parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot. She used her uncle's key to open a side door. The hallway smelled of paper and bleach. They slipped into the records room, rows of cabinets, glowing computer screens, and the hum of old fluorescent lights. Claire went to the desk. Okay, the property files should be under COLE. Isaiah scanned the shelves, his hands steady, but his heart pounding. The veteran in him had learned to trust silence, and right now the silence felt wrong. He turned toward the window. Outside, under a street lamp, a shadow moved. Claire, he whispered. We're not alone. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. What? The door burst open. 2 deputies stormed in, guns raised. Hands up! Step away from the computer. Claire gasped. Tom? The deputy smirked. Told you this was a bad idea, sweetheart. Sheriff said you might try something stupid. Isaiah stepped in front of her, hands slightly raised but eyes sharp. So this was a setup. Tom shrugged. Sheriff wanted to see how far you'd go. Guess we got our answer. Isaiah's mind raced. 2 deputies. 1 door, no cover. No time. Get down, he muttered to Claire. What? Now? He kicked the table forward, knocking 1 deputy off balance, and slammed the lights off. Gunshots cracked in the dark, sparks flying as bullets tore through metal. Isaiah tackled the 2nd deputy, disarming him with a swift twist and a punch that sent him sprawling. Claire crawled behind a filing cabinet, shaking. The 1st deputy stumbled up, aiming wildly. Freeze! Isaiah swung the gun he'd taken, not to shoot, but to knock the man's hand aside. Another shot echoed. Glass shattered. The window blew open. Then, silence. Only the sound of rain tapping the roof. When the lights flickered back on, both deputies were down, alive but unconscious. Isaiah was breathing hard, one side of his face bloodied from shattered glass. Claire stared at him in disbelief. You could have killed them. He wiped the blood away. I'm not here to make martyrs. I'm here for truth, she pointed to the computer. The files! Before more come! Isaiah rushed over. On the screen was a list of land deeds. He clicked through until he saw it. Cole family estate. Parcel 1789. The document showed it transferred 2 years ago to Dawson Holdings, LLC. Signed by Robert Dawson, Jr. He printed the record, grabbed the papers, and turned to Claire. This is enough to bury them. Before she could reply, red and blue lights flashed outside. Dozens of them! Isaiah. she whispered, terror rising. They surrounded the building. He looked out the window. Sheriff Dawson stood by his cruiser, megaphone in hand. Isaiah Cole, you're under arrest for assault, trespass, and theft of county property. Come out now or we'll come in. Claire's face went pale. What do we do? Isaiah's eyes darkened, calm but burning with resolve. He stuffed the documents inside his jacket and looked toward the back of the room. There's always another way. Out! They ran through the back corridor, sirens growing, louder and until they reached a maintenance. Door leading to the alley, Isaiah pushed it open, rain hitting their faces like shards of ice. He turned back once, locking eyes with Claire. Whatever happens, he said, you did the right thing. Then they disappeared into the night. Behind them, the sheriff's voice roared through the storm. Find them both! Dead or alive! The rain had slowed to a whisper, turning Pine Hill's streets into mirrors of mud and light. Isaiah and Claire ducked behind an abandoned grain mill at the edge of town, their breaths visible in the cold air. Somewhere in the distance, police dogs barked, and the faint hum of engines echoed down the highway. Isaiah pressed his back to the wall, drenched and breathing hard. We can't stay here long. Claire wiped rain from her face, trembling. Sheriff Dawson's got the whole county looking for you. They're saying you shot 2 deputies. Isaiah's expression was grim. And by morning, they'll have photos to prove it, she frowned. But you didn't. Doesn't matter. His voice was low. They make the story fit the man, not the truth. He crouched, unzipped his jacket, and pulled out the papers they'd risked their lives for. The ink had smudged from rain, but the words were still legible. Parcel 1789. Transfer of ownership, Cole Estate, Dawson Holdings, LLC. Signed and notarized under fake authority. Claire looked at the document. This is it. This proves they stole your father's land. Isaiah shook his head slowly. It proves theft, not murder. She blinked. Murder? He folded the papers carefully. My father didn't just die of a heart attack, like they said. The night before he passed, he told my mom he was meeting someone. A man who had evidence of a deal gone bad with Dawson's company. He never came home. Claire's voice trembled. You think Dawson killed him? Isaiah looked out into the fog. I think Dawson made sure he disappeared. They stayed quiet for a while, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the old mill. Then Claire spoke softly. There might be someone who knows the truth. My mom used to talk about a man who left town years ago, used to work for Dawson's father. His name was Earl Whitman. She said he kept copies of everything. Isaiah nodded. Where is he now? Somewhere near Lake Milton, she said. Lives off the grid. Folks call him Crazy Earl, but he's not crazy, just scared. Isaiah stood. Then that's where we're going. They stole a moment's rest before dawn, catching a ride in the back of a farmer's truck heading north. The driver didn't ask questions, just nodded when Isaiah said they were running from trouble. As miles rolled by, Claire dozed off, her head resting lightly against the window. Isaiah sat still, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Memories of Iraq flashed. Burning vehicles, dust storms, the sound of radio static before a strike. Pine Hill was no battlefield, yet the same scent of corruption lingered in its air. He whispered to himself. You can't kill a man twice, Sheriff. When Claire stirred, dawn had broken, mist rising off the fields, the sun pale as a wound. They got off near the lake and walked another mile through the woods until they saw it, a rusted trailer by the water, smoke curling from its chimney. Earl was a man carved by paranoia, wiry, gray-haired, wearing 3 coats and suspicion like armor. He opened the door holding a shotgun. Not taking visitors, he barked. Isaiah raised his hand slightly. Name's Isaiah Cole. You used to work for Sheriff Dawson's father. Earl's eyes darted between them. Cole, you Henry's boy? Yes, sir. For a moment, the old man's guard fell. He lowered the gun. Well, I'll be damned. Thought they ran your kind out for good. We need your help, Isaiah said. We know Dawson stole our land. We need proof. Earl motioned them inside. The trailer smelled of tobacco, oil, and loneliness. Papers and boxes covered every surface. He poured whiskey into tin cups, hands trembling. I kept something, he said, rummaging through a trunk. Didn't think it'd ever see daylight again. He pulled out a file folder yellowed by time. Inside were copies of property deeds, handwritten notes, and a faded photograph of Henry Cole shaking hands with a young Robert Dawson Sr. That photo was taken the day the deal went south, Earl said. Henry refused to sell. He said the land was his family's legacy. No amount of money could buy it. 2 days later he was gone, Claire frowned. Gone where? Earl's eyes darkened. Last I saw him, he was heading out to meet Dawson by the creek near the old sawmill. Sheriff said Henry never showed. But I found his truck there the next morning. Doors open, blood on the dirt. Isaiah's knuckles tightened around the photo. And you didn't tell anyone? Earl's voice cracked. You think anyone would have believed me? Dawson owned the sheriff's badge, the judge's gavel, the newspaper's ink. I tried once. They burned my house down. Said it was an accident. That's when I left. Isaiah took a slow breath. Can I keep this file? Earl hesitated, then nodded. You're your father's son. Just be careful. Dawson's meaner now than his daddy ever was. That night, they camped near the lake. The wind howled through the trees and the water shimmered under a half moon. Isaiah sat by the fire, flipping through the old documents. Each page was another piece of truth buried alive. Land surveys, signed contracts, witness statements. All connecting one name, Dawson. Claire sat across from him, staring into the flames. You ever think about just walking away? Letting it go? Isaiah didn't look up. Some things you walk away from, some things you stand for. My father stood alone once. I won't make the same mistake. She smiled faintly. He'd be proud. He finally looked up at her. Maybe. Or maybe he'd tell me to run before they finish what they started. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the world felt still. Then the snap of a branch. Isaiah was on his feet instantly, gun drawn. Claire froze, voices in the dark. Flashlights cutting through the trees. Search the area, a man shouted. They're close! It was Dawson's men. Isaiah grabbed the folder, doused the fire with his boot, and pulled Claire behind a fallen log. They crouched low as boots crunched closer. The sound of radios crackled. Sheriff says bring him in alive this time. He wants the girl to talk. Claire's breath hitched. Isaiah's hand found hers, steady, reassuring. Stay quiet. Follow me. When the lights moved east, he slipped through the brush, leading her toward the lake. They moved silently, ghosts in the fog. The water shimmered ahead like an escape and a trap all at once. Behind them, a voice called out, I see him! Gunfire split the night. Isaiah dove behind a boulder, dragging Claire with him. Bullets tore through branches overhead. He returned fire. 1, 2, 3 shots, forcing the attackers to scatter. Keep moving, he hissed. They sprinted along the shoreline, mud splashing underfoot. Isaiah's lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Ahead, an old wooden boathouse loomed, decayed but standing. They slipped inside and slammed the door. Claire collapsed against the wall, gasping. Now what? She whispered. Isaiah scanned the room. Fishing nets, rotted boards, an old radio. We wait, let the storm pass, but the storm wasn't outside. It was coming for them. As dawn bled into the lake's surface, Isaiah found an old CB radio in the corner. He fiddled with the dials until static gave way to a faint voice. Cole, you copy? It's Reed. Isaiah grabbed the mic. Reed! I got you. Took me a while to trace your ping, Reed said through crackling static. Listen, I dug into Dawson's records. The man's dirty 6 ways from Sunday, land theft, bribery, racketeering. And get this. Your father's death certificate was signed by a coroner who didn't exist. Isaiah's stomach twisted. You saying it was faked? More than that, Reed said. Your father might never have been buried where they said. Isaiah's hand tightened on the mic. Where then? Pine Hill Creek, Reed replied. Same place Earl mentioned. I think you'll find what Dawson's been hiding there for 30 years. The radio went silent. Claire stared at him. What did he say? Isaiah turned toward the sunrise, his eyes burning with new resolve. He said the past isn't buried. Before they could leave, a distant siren wailed again. This time, it wasn't chasing them. It was signaling something else. Isaiah's phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. Cole, a slow, drawling voice came through. You've been busy, soldier. Dawson, you could have walked away, the sheriff said. Could have left my town in peace. Your town? Isaiah's voice was sharp. You mean the land you stole? The people you buried. A pause. Then Dawson's tone turned colder. I'll give you one last chance. Bring me those files and I'll let the girl go. Isaiah's blood froze. You don't have her, a small laugh echoed on the line. Don't I? Isaiah spun. The corner where Claire had been sitting moments ago was empty. The back door hung open, swinging in the wind. His grip on the phone tightened. If you touch her, Dawson interrupted. Pine Hill Creek, midnight, bring the proof, or she dies. The call ended. Isaiah stood alone in the dim light, rain starting again outside. The sound mingled with the pounding of his heartbeat. He looked down at the old file in his hands, the legacy of his father, the sin of a town, the weight of truth. Then he whispered, You picked the wrong man to threaten. He loaded his gun, slung the satchel over his shoulder, and stepped into the rain. The storm gathered like judgment. By dusk, the road to Pine Hill Creek was a jagged ribbon of mud and lightning. Isaiah drove with one hand on the wheel and the other clutching the file against his chest. The wipers dragged across the windshield, smearing rain and memory into one blurred reflection of a sun chasing ghosts and a town hiding sins. Claire was gone. And for the first time since returning from war, Isaiah felt fear. He'd faced gunfire and sandstorms, ambushes, and death, but nothing compared to the hollow silence of knowing someone innocent was in his enemy's hands. The sheriff's voice still echoed in his head. Bring me the proof, or she dies. Isaiah whispered into the dark. Hold on, Claire. I'm coming! Pine Hill Creek was once a quiet stretch of water that wound through the forest like a silver vein. But tonight, it looked like something torn from a nightmare, trees bent under rain, the current swollen and black. Isaiah parked a quarter-mile out and walked the rest of the way, his boots sinking into the mud. Every sound, the hiss of rain, the crack of branches, set his nerves on edge. He'd learned in Iraq that silence could be louder than gunfire, and this silence screamed. The old sawmill loomed ahead, its silhouette broken and skeletal against flashes of lightning. That was where his father was last seen, where truth had died and lies had been born. He crept closer, eyes scanning every shadow. And then, a voice. Took you long enough. Dawson stepped from the doorway, wearing his badge like a crown. 2 deputies flanked him, rifles ready. Claire was tied to a post beside the creek, her face pale, rain matting her hair. Isaiah's breath caught. Let her go. The sheriff smiled thinly. You bring the files? Isaiah held up the folder. Right here. Good. Dawson gestured to his man. Take it. Isaiah didn't move. You get this when she's free. Lightning cracked overhead, throwing their faces into stark relief. The soldier, the sheriff, and the woman caught between them. Dawson's smirk faded. You think you can bargain with me? You think this is about land, boy? His tone darkened. Your daddy didn't die because of a few acres. He died because he couldn't keep quiet. Isaiah's grip on the folder tightened. What did you do to him? The sheriff's eyes glinted with cruel amusement. He came here just like you, waving papers and big words. Said he'd take me to court, expose me and my father. So I showed him what power really looks like. He motioned toward the creek. You're standing on it. Isaiah's stomach twisted. You buried him here. Dawson smiled. You're a smart man. The rain intensified, hammering the creek like a drumbeat of revelation. Isaiah took one step forward. You killed my father for trying to protect his home. Dawson shrugged. I kept order. Your old man wanted to change things. Wanted equality, fairness. That don't keep a town running. Fear does. Claire's voice broke through the storm. You're a coward, Dawson. The sheriff's face hardened. Shut her up. One deputy moved toward her, but Isaiah acted first. A flash of movement. His boot struck the man's wrist, sending the rifle flying. Another lunge, a punch to the jaw, and the deputy dropped. Gunfire roared. Isaiah dove behind a log, the folder clutched to his chest. Bullets ripped through the air. He rolled, grabbed the fallen rifle, and fired back. One shot hit the other deputy's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Dawson cursed, ducking behind a rusted truck. "You think you can outshoot me, soldier boy?" Isaiah's voice thundered across the rain. "I don't need to. Truth's already done it." He tossed the folder into the creek. The papers scattered like ghosts carried by the current. Dawson shouted, "No!" Isaiah stood, mudslick and unyielding. "You can't drown what's already buried." The sheriff raised his gun. But before he could fire, a figure emerged from the woods. It was Earl Whitman. He held a shotgun steady, his voice trembling but fierce. "Drop it, Dawson. It's over." Dawson's face twisted. "You old fool. You should have stayed gone." Earl stepped forward. "I buried the truth once." "Not again." Isaiah took the moment. He rushed forward, tackling Dawson into the mud. The gun went off. A blinding flash, then silence. Rain hissed as it fell on the two men struggling in the dirt. Generations of hate grinding into the earth beneath them. Finally, Isaiah stood, blood on his face, mud on his uniform, and the sheriff motionless at his feet. Earl limped to the edge of the creek, eyes glassy with memory. "He's here, son." "Your father. Been here all along." Isaiah dropped to his knees, rain and tears mixing on his cheeks. He clawed at the wet earth until his hands bled, until wood met his fingers, the splintered remains of an old coffin. Inside was nothing but bones and a rusted dog tag. He held it in his palm, reading the faded engraving, Henry Cole. Isaiah bowed his head. "I found you, Dad." For a long moment, the only sound was the river, whispering, forgiving, mourning. Claire knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You brought him home." He looked at her, eyes filled with both pain and peace. "Not yet, but I will." By morning, the story broke. Reed had uploaded the documents to every major news outlet in the state. Dawson's crimes, the forged deeds, the disappearances, the kickbacks, all of it spilled into daylight. His deputies confessed under oath, and the governor ordered a full investigation. Pine Hill, once silent under the sheriff's boot, finally spoke. The town mourned Henry Cole like a fallen hero. His land was restored to his family, and a memorial rose by the creek. Truth may drown, but it never dies. Isaiah stood before it weeks later, the sun warm on his back. The world had changed, not because of vengeance, but because one man refused to forget. Claire joined him, smiling softly. "You finally got your peace." He shook his head. "Not peace, purpose." She slipped her hand into his. "And what now?" He looked at the horizon, the town rebuilding, children laughing, the scent of rain fading. "Now I live the way he taught me. Stand tall. Speak truth, no matter who's listening." A breeze rustled through the trees, carrying whispers from the past. A father's pride, a son's promise, a town's redemption. And as Isaiah turned to leave, he whispered to the wind, "We made it, Dad." Just as he reached his truck, his phone buzzed. Unknown number again. He frowned, answered. "Cole here," a low voice replied, calm and familiar. "You think it's over, soldier?" "You only buried one Dawson." The line clicked dead. Isaiah stared into the distance, at the shadows beyond the sunlight, at the possibility that justice had only just begun. The sun had barely burned through the morning mist when Isaiah parked outside the rebuilt diner. The same diner where it had all started, where a waitress had slipped him a note that said, "They're watching you." Now, the world called him a hero. The newspapers printed headlines about the veteran who brought down Pine Hill's corrupt sheriff. TV crews came and went, snapping photos of the memorial by the creek. To everyone else, the story was over, but Isaiah couldn't shake the voice from that call. "You only buried one Dawson." He sat at the counter staring at the untouched coffee steaming in front of him. The smell of bacon and toast filled the air. Conversations buzzed around him, laughter echoing from families who could finally breathe free again. Yet beneath that peace, Isaiah felt something coiled, waiting to strike. Claire walked in, her presence soft but grounding. Her wrist still bore faint bruises from that night. She slid into the seat across from him. "You've been quiet," she said gently. Isaiah looked at her, then down at his phone. "That call." The voice wasn't Dawson. Not the one we knew. Claire frowned. Then who? He leaned back, eyes distant. Someone who knew about the creek. Someone who wants me to know it's not over. That afternoon, Isaiah went to the courthouse to sign final papers returning his father's land. The officials shook his hand, cameras flashed, and everyone smiled. But as the crowd dispersed, a man in a dark gray suit lingered near the door. He was tall, pale-skinned, with slicked back hair and calm blue eyes, the kind that measured everything before speaking. When Isaiah stepped out, the man approached, flashing a polite smile. Mr. Cole. A word, if you don't mind. Isaiah hesitated. Do I know you? Not yet. The man extended a card. Elliot Dawson. State attorney. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Dawson? Yes, the man said evenly. Robert Dawson was my uncle. Sheriff Dawson, my cousin. He tucked his hands in his pockets. You've stirred quite a storm in this county. Isaiah crossed his arms. If you're here to threaten me, not at all, Elliot interrupted smoothly. I came to thank you. That stopped him cold. Thank me? For cleaning the family's rot? Elliot said. Robert and his son embarrassed our name for decades. You exposed them, and in doing so, you've given me the leverage I need to rebuild what they destroyed. Isaiah frowned. Rebuild? Elliot smiled faintly. Power doesn't vanish, Mr. Cole. It just changes hands. Someone has to keep Pine Hill in order. You may have won the battle, but the war, the one that controls land, politics, and law, has only begun. He turned to leave, his tone softening. You're a soldier. You understand that, don't you? Isaiah's voice dropped. If you're anything like them, I'll bring you down too. Elliot paused at the door, smiling over his shoulder. Oh, I'm worse. But I don't bury bodies, Mr. Cole. I bury legacies. And then he was gone. That night, Isaiah returned to his father's land, acres of rolling fields and the creek running like a silver scar through its heart. The wind was calm, the stars bright, but peace still felt like a stranger. He walked to the edge of the water where his father's remains had been found. The grass had started to grow back, soft and green over the wound. He knelt, tracing his fingers through the soil. His phone buzzed. A message from Reed. You need to see this. Found something in state archives. A file appeared in the chat. Cole Estate, Requisition Order, 1987. Isaiah opened it. The letterhead bore a familiar name. Elliot Dawson, Assistant Land Commissioner. He read the contents, his pulse quickening. Land transfer. Cole property. Due to unresolved tax liens and outstanding debts, ownership shall revert to Dawson Holdings until further notice. Isaiah's voice cracked with disbelief. No, that's impossible. Reed texted again. He signed it right after your father's death. He was behind it the whole time. Isaiah felt his breath catch. The pieces fell into place. Elliot hadn't come to thank him. He'd come to see what Isaiah knew. The Dawsons had built their empire on generations of lies, and now the last of them intended to take back control, through law, not bullets. At dawn, Isaiah drove to the county records office. The clerk hesitated when he asked to see property transfers. That file's restricted, sir. By who? Isaiah demanded. By order of the state attorney, the clerk whispered. Mr. Elliot Dawson! Isaiah's hands tightened. He's erasing the evidence. Outside, he called Reed. He's cleaning house. Everything we proved, he's going to undo it. Reed's voice crackled over the line. Then we make it public again. Bigger this time. Full press, national level. Before Isaiah could reply, he heard a loud boom in the distance. He turned, black smoke rising from the horizon. From his land, he hung up and raced back, his truck roaring down the dirt road. The smell hit him before he arrived, burning timber, acrid and thick. The cabin he'd rebuilt in his father's memory was engulfed in flames. Claire stood by the fence, tears streaking her soot-stained face. It started out of nowhere, she cried. The fire department's on their way. Isaiah grabbed her shoulders. Did anyone see who did it? She shook her head. No, but there was a car, dark sedan. No plates. He looked toward the woods, fury burning in his chest. Elliot. That night, Isaiah sat by the ashes. Everything smelled of smoke and loss. Claire knelt beside him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. Maybe it's time to stop, she said quietly. You've done enough. He didn't answer. She touched his hand. "If you keep fighting, you'll become them." He turned to her, eyes dark but steady. "No, they fight to keep others down. I fight to lift my father's name. There's a difference." Claire hesitated. "What are you going to do?" Isaiah stood, the orange glow of embers flickering against his face. "Elliot Dawson wants control? Fine. I'll give him a stage he can't handle." He looked toward the horizon, the courthouse where his father's truth was buried, and where the next battle would rise. As he turned to leave, a faint glint caught his eye in the soot. He bent down and pulled out a small metal box, scorched but intact. Inside was a folded piece of paper wrapped in oilcloth. The handwriting was faded, but the signature was unmistakable. Henry Cole. "If you're reading this, my son, then they've done what I feared. But remember, evil thrives in silence. Speak even when your voice shakes. The Dawsons may own this town, but they'll never own your soul." Isaiah closed his eyes, tears mixing with ash. His father's words lit a fire that no match could extinguish. He whispered, "You were right, Dad. I'll finish this." A week later, a headline appeared across national media. "Cole versus Dawson, landmark lawsuit filed alleging generational land theft." Cameras surrounded the courthouse as Isaiah stepped out of his truck. Wearing his military jacket, the dog tag gleaming on his chest. Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinded, but he walked straight through, jaw set, eyes unflinching. Inside, Elliot Dawson waited, sharp suit, calm smile, confidence oozing from every gesture. "Welcome to the big leagues, soldier," Elliot said. "Let's see how truth fares without a gun in your hand." Isaiah took his seat, sliding a weathered folder onto the table. Inside it, the last letter of Henry Cole. He looked at Elliot and said quietly but firmly, "Truth doesn't need a gun. It just needs a witness." The gavel struck, echoing through the hall, and so began the battle not of bullets, but of words, one that would decide the soul of Pine Hill itself. The courthouse was a fortress of whispers. Every hallway, every marble step echoed with expectation. The air was thick, with tension, with truth waiting to be set free, and with ghosts of the past watching from the walls. Isaiah stood outside the courtroom doors, his reflection staring back from the polished wood. The dog tag around his neck glinted faintly. Henry Cole, the name that started this fight. The name he would not let die again. Claire brushed imaginary dust from his jacket. "You ready?" He smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter if I am." "Truth's ready," she nodded, eyes wet. "Then go make them listen." He stepped through the doors. Reporters filled the benches. Camera lights flashed like lightning, but none of that mattered to Isaiah. Across the room, Elliot Dawson sat at the defense table, calm, elegant, almost smug. His silver cufflinks caught the light each time he moved, each gesture calculated. The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes named Judge Holloway, looked over her glasses. "Mr. Cole, you are representing yourself. Are you sure you want to proceed without counsel?" Isaiah nodded. "I've fought battles without backup before, Your Honor." The courtroom chuckled softly. Even the judge allowed herself a small smile. "Very well. You may proceed." Elliot's attorney, a polished man from the Capitol, smirked. This should be entertaining. Isaiah ignored him. He placed the old metal box on the evidence table, the same one he found in the ashes. "This," he began, "belonged to my father, Henry Cole, a man who was buried not by death alone, but by a lie that stretched across generations." He turned toward the jury, voice low but firm. The Dawsons took his land, his dignity, and his life. But what they couldn't take, what they never understood, was his belief that truth will always find its way to the surface. He opened the box. Inside were the letters, the deeds, and the signed confession of a deputy who had come forward after the Creek incident. Isaiah placed each paper carefully before the jury. "These are the original documents my father tried to bring to light 30 years ago, the ones Sheriff Dawson burned to hide their crimes. But the state archives, they kept copies. Proof that this family didn't just steal land, they stole futures." Elliot leaned forward, voice smooth as silk. "Objection, Your Honor. Grandstanding." "Overruled," Judge Holloway said. Let him speak. Isaiah turned to Elliot. You signed the order that transferred our property, didn't you? Back in '87. Elliot's expression didn't flinch. I processed it. That doesn't mean I authored it. Isaiah's gaze hardened. Your name, your signature, your seal. And yet, my father was already dead when that transfer was approved. The courtroom gasped. Elliot leaned back slowly, still composed. Do you have proof of that timeline? Isaiah smiled faintly. I do now. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded letter, his father's final words. If you're reading this, my son, then they've done what I feared. He read it aloud, every word trembling but strong. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. Isaiah placed the letter down gently. That letter was found sealed beneath the cabin, the same cabin that burned. A fire started days after Elliot Dawson restricted public access to the property records. A fire meant to erase what was left. Elliot shifted for the first time, jaw tightening. You're suggesting Isaiah cut him off. I'm not suggesting. I'm stating. The defense tried to discredit him. They painted him as an angry veteran, a man haunted by grief. But Isaiah didn't break. He called witnesses. Reed, who testified about the hacked archives. Earl, who limped to the stand, his voice shaking as he confessed his part in Henry Cole's burial. And finally, Claire, who told the court what she'd heard that night at Pine Hill Creek when she described how Dawson had laughed. You're standing on it. The room went silent again. Isaiah watched Elliot's mask begin to crack. He was sweating now, his lawyer whispering frantically beside him. But Isaiah wasn't done. He stepped closer to the bench. Your Honor, this isn't just about me or my father. It's about what happens when power believes it can rewrite truth. It's about a town that learned to stay silent, and a man who refused. Judge Holloway nodded slowly. Continue. Isaiah lifted the dog tag from his neck and set it on the table. The metal clinked softly, the sound of memory. This is all my father had when they buried him. They took everything else, but what they didn't know is he left something behind in me. The will to finish what he started. By the third day, the tension was unbearable. Reporters filled every seat. Outside, protesters held signs reading, Justice for Henry Cole and Truth Never Dies. And then, the unexpected happened. During cross-examination, Isaiah asked Elliot one final question. Did you ever visit Pine Hill Creek the night my father disappeared? Elliot hesitated. I had no reason to. Isaiah slid a photograph across the table. It was grainy, taken from an old film roll recovered from Earl's garage, showing 3 figures by the creek. One of them was clearly Robert Dawson. Another was his son. The third wore a long coat and glasses, Elliot. The courtroom erupted. Elliot's lawyer shouted, "That could be anyone!" But Judge Holloway slammed her gavel. Order, order! Isaiah's voice was calm but lethal. You were there, Elliot? You watched your uncle kill my father, and you covered it up. Elliot's composure shattered. You don't understand. It was supposed to be simple and just scare him off. He wouldn't stop talking! The room froze. Elliot realized too late what he had said. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Dawson, was that a confession? Elliot's face drained of color. I misspoke. Isaiah stepped closer, eyes burning. No, you finally spoke the truth. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The courthouse waited, restless and electric. When they returned, the foreman's voice trembled slightly. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Isaiah Cole, and recommend full restitution of property, as well as federal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. A collective breath filled the room. Then cheers broke out. Isaiah closed his eyes, tears running freely. Claire gripped his hand. Reporters swarmed, flashes going off like fireworks, but Isaiah didn't see any of it. All he saw was his father, smiling from somewhere unseen. Judge Holloway stood. Mr. Cole, your father would be proud. Isaiah nodded, voice breaking. He already is. Months later, the diner had a new plaque on the wall. In honor of Henry Cole, truth served here. Isaiah sat at the same booth where it all began. Across from him, the waitress, a young woman new to town, smiled shyly. You want your usual, Mr. Cole? He chuckled softly. Steak, medium rare. She nodded and turned to leave, but then paused. "Sir?" He looked up. "Yeah?" She smiled knowingly. "Your father used to order it the same way. Said it tasted like home." Isaiah froze, heart catching in his throat. "You knew him?" She shook her head. "No, sir. My mama did. She worked here back in the day. Said he was the kindest man she ever met." As she walked away, Isaiah stared out the window at the sunrise breaking over Pine Hill Creek. "Golden and pure," he whispered. "We did it." "Dad!" The sound of laughter and clinking silverware filled the diner. Outside, the world kept moving, freer now, fairer now, because one man had the courage to fight for truth. And though the battle was over, the message remained. Evil thrives in silence. Speak even when your voice shakes.